And it gives me great honor to introduce Laura Cantrell of the Joint Ocean Commission Initiative for this panel. Laura, come on up.
Thanks, Jason, and we're very glad to be here. As Jason said, I'm Laura Cantrell of Meridian Institute and here with the Joint Ocean Commission Initiative. We're very pleased to be here. Before I set the stage for this session, I want to thank Jason and Jeb and the team at the National Marine Sanctuary Foundation for providing the Joint Initiative with this forum to talk with you about the Joint Initiative's 2012 U.S. Ocean Policy Report Card. I think that many of you in this room know that the Joint Ocean Commission Initiative is a bipartisan collaboration of senior leaders who represent diverse viewpoints and interests in our oceans, and it includes former members of the U.S. Commission on Ocean Policy and the Pew Oceans Commission. The primary goal of the Joint Initiative is to accelerate the pace of change that results in meaningful ocean policy reform, and the issuing of Ocean Policy Report Card, which the Joint Initiative has done for several years, is one tool that the Joint Initiative uses to try to help catalyze that meaningful ocean policy reform. The intent of the report card is to gauge the nation's progress, the nation collectively as a whole, in implementing key ocean policy reforms. The assessment is designed to help focus attention on ocean policy priorities and also offer recommendations for carrying out successful reforms going forward. So let me describe how this session will work. We're going to begin with brief remarks by Bill Ruckelshaus and Norm Mineta, co-chairs of the Joint Ocean Commission Initiative. They'll describe for you the categories that were assessed. There are 5 categories that the Joint Initiative assessed, and the grades that were issued for those categories. We'll then ask other members of the Joint Initiative Leadership Council who are here joining the co-chairs for a panel discussion and hopefully a dialogue with all of you. So please allow me to introduce folks before you this afternoon. Our co-chairs, Bill Ruckelshaus is currently Strategic Director of the Madrona Venture Group in Seattle, Washington. He was the first and then the 5th administrator of EPA and a member of the U.S. Commission on Ocean Policy. Norm Mineta is the Vice Chairman of Hill and Knowlton in Washington, D.C. Mr. Mineta served under President George W. Bush as the Secretary of Transportation and as Secretary of Commerce under President Bill Clinton. And prior to that, from 1975 to 95, he represented California's 13th and 15th districts in the U.S. House of Representatives. And joining Bill and Norm today are several fellow members of the Joint Ocean Commission Initiative Leadership Council, and I'd like to introduce them as well. Scott Goods, right here to my right, is Vice President of Legislative Affairs for Space Systems and Operations at Lockheed Martin Corporation. Lillian Barone, on the other side of Bill, is a former Assistant Executive Director of the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey and was a member of the U.S. Commission on Ocean Policy. And Bob Gagosian, who's the President of the Consortium on Ocean Leadership. So now I'm going to turn it over to Bill and Norm to share some brief remarks with you about the report card, and then we'll come back and open it up for some Q&A and some dialogue with all of you.
Laura, thanks very much. Norm and I will try to be as brief as possible. There are some subtleties to these grades which we want you to be acquainted with. We've also decided to sit down so as to ensure that our remarks are briefer than they would be if we were standing waving our arms. As Laura has mentioned, these are grades we have given for 5 separate categories that relate to our work trying to carry forward the work of the Pew Commission and the National Commission on Ocean Policy. Those two reports were issued in the middle of the last decade, and we formed this Joint Ocean Commission initiative for purposes of trying to carry forward both the public understanding of the findings of those reports and the recommendations which we made to the then administration, then Bush administration, as well as now to the Obama administration. And I think it's fair to say that regardless of what happens in the coming election, we will continue to try to ensure that the recommendations of these two reports are paid attention to. As Laura has mentioned, I'm delighted to be joined by Norm Mineta. And what Norm and I have decided to do is to divide up the 5 categories which we have decided to issue grades for, and then open it up for questions. There will be some questions directed at other panel members here, as well as to Norm and myself. And so please, as we're talking, try to think of things you might ask where clarification is needed. We think that this report that we're issuing today, and by the way, those reports, are they being passed out now, or are they?
They're in the back, so you'll be able to
you
get
can
them.
pick them up when we're finished.
Yeah.
We don't want you to anticipate what we're going to say, but they'll be available as soon as we're finished here.
Bill, there's the reporters on the slide here that you can't.
I take it as what I'm looking at here down at the, okay. The implementation of this policy will benefit the health of the oceans, obviously, our national security. It will support our coastal economies and millions of Americans' jobs that depend on it. And so implementing this national ocean policy is really important. All these report cards are as a tool to measure progress on certain items of ocean policy concern. And it specifically, the report here suggests what progress we're making on the implementation of our national ocean policy, which the President announced back in 2010. And the purpose of that policy, which was called for by both the Pew Commission and the National Commission. You having trouble hearing me?
Just a little bit.
Probably just as well. It will improve. We believe it will improve the management of our both oceans and Great Lakes, coastal as well as the ocean itself. As I mentioned, the National Ocean Policy was issued in July of 2010, and it again responded to a long-term set of recommendations by the Joint Ocean Commission Initiative, and certainly not just this group, but a lot of others that were engaged in the kind of important work that you all are. And that priority, when it was adopted by the President, was, I think, a large step forward in trying to coordinate and the activities of the agencies that are part of the National Ocean Council and departments, as well as increased collaboration between the federal, state, local, tribal governments in implementing this policy. In focusing on the National Ocean Policy, we issued these report cards in the 5 areas that are listed there on the screen: national leadership and support, regional, state, and local leadership and implementation, research, science, and education, funding, and the Law of the Sea Convention. Given grades in the past in all of these categories, in fact, we had the report card of 2008, which was the last time we issued this, was an expanded list to this one, and we felt it was important to try to narrow it down to what was really crucial to make progress on our national ocean policy and its implementation. And one thing I think it's very important to say is, when there are low grades in this report, and that should not be used to hide the often very laudable efforts that have taken place in the Congress or in the executive branch or in other levels of government that haven't yet borne fruit. I mean, if you take the last item on the agenda, the Law of the Sea Convention, that's based on the Senate not yet having ratified that convention, which is the end result that at least members of this Joint Ocean Commission initiative are unanimously supporting. There's funding as well as the Law of the Sea Commission. We think that given that a lot of great efforts have gone on, and some of the things like the National Ocean Policy, the National Ocean Council have been both announced and created, we're still falling short of where we need to be in order for our expectations to be realized. So let me just move now quickly to the three areas that I'm going to talk about. Those are the top three on the chart itself. The first one is the national leadership and support. We have given them a C, and this is for the implementation over the entire government, not just one branch of government or one level of government. It's over the entire government. So it's in getting the whole government to move in the right direction is, as we all know, not simple and not easy. We're not trying to comment here on the progress that's already been made, or not trying to negatively comment on the progress that's already been made, or the very very strong exertions that are being made to implement this policy and carry it out. The main cause for the mediocre grade in this category was a lack of support for, and in some cases outright attack by Congress on the national ocean policy. As many of you are aware, the House of Representatives recently voted to cut funding for implementation of this policy. This demonstrates to us that a logical strategy to increase coordination among government agencies, which should transcend partisanship, has become hampered by misunderstanding in some cases and even occasional partisan gamesmanship by some members. We encourage members of Congress to engage in a constructive debate on how the policy can reduce duplication, increase efficiencies, and overall better manage our ocean and coastal resources. This includes protecting traditional uses of the ocean like fishing, finding new ways for new uses like offshore renewable and in some cases non-renewable energy, assuming there is a national energy policy that makes sense out of this, to fit rationally into an increasingly busy and crowded ocean. The joint initiative strongly urges Congress to reject efforts to restrict or prohibit funds from being used to implement the national ocean policy. In contrast, the National Ocean Council has taken some notable initial implementation steps. The Council provides senior level leadership for policy implementation as well as a coordinating structure for federal agencies. Those of you who have been following the National Ocean Council's work know that there are 27 agencies and departments represented on the Council. That's how many agencies of the government now have significant responsibilities in the management of our ocean resources. Do we need coordination? If we've got 27 government agencies responding to various aspects of the ocean needs, the answer is clearly yes. We need coordination and collaboration. That was the purpose in the creating of the Council in the first place. Improving coordination among federal agencies is not easy, yet we believe the National Ocean Council structure has led to improved interagency communication and coordination on ocean issues. The Joint Ocean Initiative also commends the National Ocean Council for release of the draft National Ocean Policy Implementation Plan and the convening of the National Workshop to kick off regional ocean planning processes. We look forward to the release of the final implementation plan soon and expect that it will lead to tangible results. I know many of you have commented on that implementation plan, and so has the Joint Initiative. One area needing improvement is effective communication. This is spelled out in our report. The Joint Initiative urges the National Ocean Council to address ongoing stakeholder concerns and provide increased opportunities for business leaders, recreational users, and average citizens to provide input regarding policy implementation. It would not be fair to issue this kind of statement without also pointing out that the National Ocean Council has made a really extraordinary effort to communicate with stakeholders. They have reached out to all parts of the country, to all people who have an interest in the uses of the ocean for their input into this implementation plan and actually the policy itself. They deserve a lot of credit for that. The problem is we still haven't gotten a very broad public understanding of the reasons why we have a national ocean policy, why we have a National Ocean Council. I think if there was an understanding on the part of the public as to the rationale for those kind of moves by the administration, there would be a lot more support for it and a lot less tolerance for attacks on these kinds of movements when they make so much sense, regardless of what particular partisan part of the spectrum you're a member of. So that level of communication we think needs improvement. We know there are concerns and misconceptions about regional ocean planning and that they need to be addressed. Also, the National Ocean Council should reach out directly to ocean industries for ideas on how to gain efficiency in the regulatory process, reduce conflicts among ocean users, and achieve economic growth while protecting the health of the ecosystems on which many of these industries depend, industries such as fishing, farming, aquaculture. With improved communication from the Council and a commitment from Congress to support the policy's wise implementation, we would expect dramatic improvements in this category throughout 2012. The second one up there is regional, state, and local leadership and implementation. That, as you will undoubtedly have noted, is the highest grade that we've given. This has been true in the past. The efforts that are going on at the regional level, such as New England, the Middle Atlantic states, the Gulf of Mexico, the Great Lakes, along the West Coast in California and Oregon, and a lot of things that are happening in my home state of Washington. In fact, the governor has just convened a ocean acidification panel, of which I'm a co-chairman, to look at the causes and what we might do about the problems of ocean acidification. They're quite severe along the northwest coast and particularly in Puget Sound. So we've awarded, because of these kind of efforts, we've awarded the highest grade to this category. I mentioned the Northeast and the Mid-Atlantic, the Gulf. These initiatives have provided the consolidation of data, whether monitoring data or data on ocean conditions, establishing a regional portal for doing that, laying the groundwork for ocean planning. And states in the region are also strengthening relationships with federal agencies that are operating in all of these areas. As I mentioned, we have this ocean acidification panel in the state of Washington. Did I mention that? I should have said. The states are making these strides despite their own significant budget issues through innovation, creativity, and leveraging of resources. States are actually doing a very good job of figuring out how to make progress without any money. But eventually we're going to need money. I would call your attention to the grade for funding as indicative of the need to not just rhetorically support these kinds of issues, but also support them financially. And as these states and regions are leading the way on implementing the National Ocean Policy, they need support. They need consistent high-level participation by federal agency partners. And as I've mentioned, they need resources. The initiative calls on the Congress to increase federal funding for regional ocean partnerships. The modest funds provided in fiscal year 2011 and 2012 significantly boosted the productivity of regional partnerships. It's amazing how much a little bit of money in these regional efforts will do. The Congress will see a significant return on any increased investment in these partnerships. The joint initiative also recommends that the National Ocean Council provide flexibility for regions in implementing the policy. This flexibility is especially important in regard to regional ocean planning, a tool that can give coastal states significantly more influence over other activities in federal waters than they currently have, and that can help protect and promote jobs as new uses of the ocean try to fit rationally into the open ocean space that is already crowded with important traditional uses. It's very important that levels of government understand what their role is in all of this. Federal government obviously has a sort of transcendent role in managing our oceans, but there are a lot of things that can be done at the regional and state level, even local level. And the government can set the framework for which progress can be made, and that was a lot which had to do with the issuance of the National Ocean Policy and this implementation plan. The federal government also has to learn how to get out of the way once they've indicated to regional and state governments what needs to be done, and leave it more up to them to figure out how to do it. They have to be held accountable to certain standards and measures, but it's a lot easier for the people at the local level, at the watershed level, for instance, to participate effectively if they're given a broad outline of what's needed and then allowed to work very creatively on figuring out how to do it. Continued leadership at the state and regional level with robust support from the federal government will really be the cornerstone of successful implementation going forward. The last one I'm going to talk about is research, science, and education. This effort, this part of our analysis has received a C. The grade was significantly affected by the President's fiscal year 2013 budget request that called for effective elimination of the National Environmental Education Act programs at EPA, cut NOAA's environmental literacy programs, and dramatically reduced the National Science Foundation's climate change education grants. These cuts were not significant in terms of total monies. They amounted about $22 million for all three of those programs. But their impact on the need for increased education, whether it's science, technology, engineering, or math, we've all talked about STEM education, their impact on those initiatives is really significant. And that had a lot to do with this grade. We need to train the next generation of ocean scientists and engineers so the U.S. can continue to lead in this innovation-based global economy. So these cuts cannot stand. Outside of the federal budget, we've seen some positive progress on science and research. The Joint Initiative applauds the new Ocean Data Portal launched by the National Ocean Council, which provides public access to non-confidential federal ocean data and tools. The Joint Initiative also recognizes the good work done for large-scale restoration initiatives, including the Great Lakes Restoration, the Gulf of Mexico. Puget Sound is another one that has made significant progress over the last few years. The Integrated Ocean Observation System, IOS, is another important need. The Joint Initiative urges Congress and the administration to commit the resources to fully implement IOS. Getting this data that is so necessary for us to understand the existing condition of the ocean, tracing it over time in a considered, technically sound way, is the only way we can tell whether we're making any progress. And I know many of you, having testified in Congress and in state legislatures, when somebody leans over and saying, are we getting anywhere for all the money we're spending? And we have to say we don't know because we don't have the data or the monitoring information that we need to answer your question rationally. Those same bodies will often not appropriate any money to give us the information to answer their question. That's got to stop. We've got to get serious about our concern about the ocean and make sure that we're collecting the data necessary to find out whether we're making any progress. So we call on the National Ocean Council to move quickly to complete the updated Ocean Research Priorities Plan, which is a very good initiative on their part, and they're moving on it. But we need to make that priorities plan, the research priority plan, part of this implementation strategy. And last but definitely not least, the Joint Initiative urges restoration of critical federal education funds. Now let me turn it over to Norm to discuss our grades on funding and the Law of the Sea Convention. And Norm, I apologize for taking so much time.
No problem. Thank you very much, Bill. First of all, I want to thank all of you for attending this session, or this session this week during the Capitol Hill Ocean Week. And because all of you are so integral to our getting the word out about these issues that Bill has pointed out and that I will talk about as well. I also want to thank the National Marine Sanctuary Foundation and Jason for all of their efforts in putting this week together as well. As I look at this report card, it sort of reminds me of those postcards I got after I took the finals at Berkeley and got me on the dean's list. Not that good list, but that other list. So I don't know why I've been given the task of reporting on the last two functions with those.
Look at the grades, Norm.
Well, I mean, that's why I said it reminded me of the grades I got at Berkeley. So in any event, let's start with funding. The grade for the funding category speaks for itself, D-. The fact of the matter is that ocean management, science, and education programs have been chronically underfunded. Oceans are one of the strongest economic drivers in this country, yet we continue to fail to make the necessary investments in ocean management. Funding for most federal ocean agencies and most state, local programs that manage coastal and ocean resources has been level or reduced over the past years. So I want to highlight 3 important steps that we need to take to correct this downward trend. First, we need an ocean investment fund. Now, this has been a long-standing priority of the joint initiative, and we continue to strongly urge Congress to establish a trust fund. Secondly, we need to find a workable solution to fix NOAA's funding issues. Our nation's leading ocean agency has faced a particular challenge in recent years due to increased responsibilities for funding satellite programs. At the same time, a number of key ocean management and science programs across the agency have been scaled back, most recently in the President's fiscal year 2013 budget request. The significant funding shortfalls have challenged NOAA's capacity to maintain important ocean and coastal programs. The joint initiative urges the administration and Congress to make it a priority to rebalance NOAA's funding portfolio so that satellite programs and ocean and coastal programs each have adequate resources to fulfill their respective missions. Thirdly, the administration and Congress need to boost funding for state and regional efforts to address ocean, coastal, and Great Lakes programs. I'd like to next deal with the law of the sea convention program. I'd like to focus now on this top priority for this nation where we are literally failing, and that is the joint initiatives gave an F for continued failure to act on the law of the sea convention. The United States must accede to the law of the sea convention right away for reasons of both national security and economic vitality. The joint initiative recognizes some promising steps, including, first of all, strong statements of support by Secretary of Defense Panetta and Secretary of State Clinton, as well as other senior officials in the administration. There has also been resounding support for the convention from business leaders and the nation's security community, including senior military leaders. We applaud the recent hearings of the Senate Committee on Foreign Relations on May 23rd to continue an ongoing discussion about the Law of the Sea Convention. The hearing was a key step, but this treaty has been the subject of numerous hearings over the years. It has been broadly supported for many years, and still we continue to wait for the Senate to provide its advice and consent to the President to join the convention. All major U.S. ocean industries support accession to the convention. These groups understand that the provisions of the convention help protect vital U.S. economic interests and provide the stability crucial for investment in global maritime enterprises. The joint initiative strongly urges the Senate to expeditiously take action to provide its advice and consent to accede to this treaty. I will now turn it back to Bill for closing thoughts.
Thanks, Norm. We certainly want to encourage any questions that you have. We'll ask other members of the panel to respond to those as well as either Norm or myself. Let me mention one thing that underscores this Law of the Sea debate that's now been going on for Lord knows how many decades. We're simply not at the table as very significant decisions are made regarding our oceans all over the world. In last Friday's Wall Street Journal, there was an op-ed piece signed by 5 former Republican secretaries of state, starting with Henry Kissinger, Jim Baker, Colin Powell, George Shultz, and Condoleezza Rice, all of whom strongly recommended the ratification by the Senate of the Law of the Sea. It's a terribly important international effort on behalf of our country, and we don't participate in what's going on as issues that are vital to our future as well as the world's future are being discussed. We're trying very hard, as I know many of you have for a long time, to see if we can't figure out some way to get this ratified. And I would be less than candid if I were to say next year when we show up here, we may still see an F after that last item on our agenda, but we certainly hope that's not true. We believe, the Joint Initiative believes, that the rapid and vigorous implementation of the National Ocean Policy is essential. Our jobs, our economy, our national security, and the environmental health of the oceans are tied directly to the implementation of this policy. The grades that have been issued in our report card are important indicators of our progress, our lack of it in implementing our nation's first comprehensive ocean policy. I think it would be a mistake to look at everything that we've been doing over the last several years as a glass half full. It isn't a glass half empty either, but maybe the last one is. It's pretty close to being empty with an F. But the overall effort has resulted in significant progress, and we should really be taking hope from that as we look at the kind of things that can happen at the regional level, for instance, on a completely nonpartisan basis, to deal with the kinds of issues that directly affect people where they live. That's why engaging people at the regional level, state, and even very local level is so crucial to our success. It's got to be a shared commitment from all of our leaders and government at all levels, as well as the private sector, non-governmental organizations, and academic communities. Our initiative strongly encourages our nation's leaders to put aside partisanship and to work together to implement this policy. Because we believe, as I mentioned a moment ago, it will result in tangible benefits to our society, to our national security, to our economy, and to the invaluable health of the oceans. So with that, we'll close any formal remarks. We'd be glad to answer any questions any of you might have. I'll turn it back to you, Laura.
Okay, great. Thank you, Bill. Thank you, Norm. So in just a moment, we're going to open it up to questions and comments from you. And we promised the Sanctuary Foundation we'd do our part to stay on track, but I think we have a few minutes, right? We have to take some questions. And before I open it up, I'm going to ask a question, but before I even do that, I want to ask any of the other panelists if there's anything that you wanted to add to what Bill and Norm shared as the report card overview. You just open it up for some questions. Then let me start by asking this question of the entire panel. As Bill and Norm noted in their remarks, and as the Joint Initiative has highlighted in the report card, important steps have been taken by the administration to begin the implementation of the National Ocean Policy. And I think the Joint Initiative, again, as Bill said, very much acknowledges and appreciates the efforts, hard work of people in the federal agencies, both here in D.C. and in the regions, who are working hard to ensure that the policy leads to real results on the ground and in the water. But to my question, one of the fundamental goals of the National Ocean Policy is to facilitate better coordination and leveraging of resources among federal agencies. And in your experience, we'd like to know what are key things that agency leaders should do to continue to foster better coordination under the National Ocean Policy, and what actions can people in this room and people who are part of the broader ocean community take to support those efforts? Lillian?
Laura, yeah, I'd like to start with a thought, Laura. I was struck by a comment Bill made at the beginning, which is that there's a lack of understanding about the importance or the value or the purpose of the policy, the National Ocean Policy. And I think from the transportation community's viewpoint, we understand that this is an initiative to build coherence, to bring not just the communication and cooperation or collaboration of the federal entities together with the states and regions and local communities, private sector groups, but to actually use the policy as a mechanism to integrate the already existing federal policies in different areas, whether it's transportation or energy or the basic commercial structure of the country as well as security. So one of the things that troubles me is that I don't get why people don't understand that, and so I'm really interested in hearing thoughts about how we can better communicate the coherence function, that this is not a policy that's on top of or superseding the existing policies, but one that's designed to pull us together so that we understand that security in the Arctic is only one factor. So is transportation need to be addressed in the Arctic. So is energy and commerce broadly. How do we, whether it's fisheries or other factors, so how do we help one another understand that? Okay. That's sort of the overarching thought that I'd like to start out with.
All right, very good. Anyone else want to chime in on that? Yeah. All right, so how does the Q&A work? We have mics that people can have. Okay, so raise your hand right here. Someone will bring you a mic. Would you please identify yourself and ask your question?
Yes, Marcia McNutt, USGS. I think we all agree that NOAA's funding situation is dire, but I also want to highlight the fact that the Department of the Interior has substantial responsibilities for the ocean, with the large area of the submerged continental shelf and territorial seas that we have responsibilities for jurisdiction over. And we're second only to the Department of Labor in terms of budget erosion over the last decade. And we're also quite parallel to NOAA in terms of the fact that we've been asked to take responsibility for finding funding for a $1 billion satellite program, namely Landsat, without any new funding. And USGS is a $1 billion agency, and it's a $1 billion satellite that we have to fund. So is this at all on the radar screen in terms of an ocean issue?
Well, it certainly is. You know, we didn't know how to go much below F for funding, and the more you examine the needs for funding a rational policy for managing our oceans, the more you find the need for money. And interestingly, it's not all that much money. It is more than we're putting in today, but certainly we could fund some of the efforts that are going on by existing agencies, like the educational responsibilities that both EPA and the National Science Foundation and NOAA have that I mentioned earlier. And it's true of the Interior Department and other departments of government that they have significant, that's why there are 27 members of this council, they have significant responsibilities for interacting with the ocean. And coordinating all of those responsibilities and making them more efficient and effective is a very much a part of the National Ocean Policy, but in the National Ocean Council's charge. But in the last analysis, you need money to do these things. We've convinced ourselves as a society we're out of money. And I don't think we are. We're out of our willingness to spend things on things that are in our collective interest. And that it'll translate into individual interest once those investments are made. But if we don't make them, it's going to have a significant negative impact on our economy. And unfortunately, that argument does not seem to get through to people who say we should not be funding anything more. And in fact, what we should be doing is cutting back on what we're now funding. And this will hurt us in the international arena, just like our failure to be members of the Law of the Sea Convention. It will hurt us in our economic competition globally. Yep. And it's a case that has to be made. We're trying to help make it here. We won't be able to make the whole thing, but it's certainly an important part of our country's future progress.
If I could just follow up on what Bill mentioned. Having spent 21 years in the Congress, the problem I see right now is that people can't make the distinction between spending that's an investment and spending that's a consumption. Right. And there's this attitude about all spending is bad, or that we're going to cut our spending in order to get us to a prosperous state. And I don't think we can cut enough out of the budget to get us to that prosperous state. And in the meantime, we will be foregoing making these investments that are so necessary in terms of our future. And I think that's why we're hoping that, and the other part of it is that it may be federal spending, but it's also the money that's spent at the regional and state level. So it's really a bottoms up from that perspective. And it's not just a now hear this, now hear this, and all of that comes flowing down. It is a bottoms up approach. And I think about what you're doing in Ventura County, as you were pointing out this morning in the panel, and to me those are the kinds of bottoms up approach that are so significant to get this word out, as well as for people to be able to see those economic interests working on their behalf.
Can I just, Marsha, I can't see you from where I am, but I was going to say we had a, oh, there you are. We had a panel here last year at the CHOW, Capital Oceans Week, where we had all the Ocean Council agencies, and I think we had at least two representatives from the Department of Interior to talk about Interior's role in the oceans. And I think most of the recommendations from both commissions and the joint Ocean Commission initiative talk about overall federal programs in the oceans. Clearly, satellites, I think the Commission understands, the JOC understands the importance of satellites as part of the observing system. Satellite systems do sea surface temperatures, they do coastal weather, they do search and rescue, they obviously track hurricanes. In the case of Landsat, obviously for coastal zone management, it's extremely important to be able to see the sort of changes that Landsat provides. I think the main recommendation that's here is that satellite, I don't know the funding situation for Landsat as well as I know some of the NOAA satellite programs or NASA satellite programs, but I think that the recommendation was that satellite programs have done okay. They've done fairly well in terms of the administration's budgets the last few years and congressional appropriations, and the issue is the other programs in the agencies probably haven't done as well, and I think the statement was that they should do as well, that they should be supported as strongly, whether education, science, in situ ocean observations, for example.
Marcia, in our report, which you'll see under the funding section, there's a discussion on infrastructure, and we all know in this room that the ocean sciences requires a lot of infrastructure, be it underwater vehicles, ships, satellites, data portals, data acquisition, storage, whatever systems that one needs. We're generating a huge amount of data on an hourly basis. And how are we going to keep up this particular infrastructure? We don't do a really good job in this country in long-term operations and maintenance of any infrastructure. And as we move forward with the demands on ocean science and research and the services that we're looking for from federal agencies and independent organizations, where's those resources going to come from? There's going to be increased pressure. Now, there's been a couple of reports that have come out, and we refer to that in this particular report card. One is the decadal survey that the NRC came out with respect to the satellites. A few years ago, it was on a pretty good track. It's not on a pretty good track right now. And the second report is another NRC report that just came out recently on the infrastructure needs for the next 30 years for ocean sciences. And I would suggest that those two reports and that particular issue of infrastructure is going to be really key to success of this field in the future, and especially with respect to what services we expect and would desire from the ocean, and that the national ocean policy cannot be carried out with that infrastructure.
So I know that we are just about out of time. Jason's told me that we can take one more question, so we'd like to ask if there's someone who's got one more question over here, and here comes your mic, and you'll identify yourself, and we'll have one more quick response to a very good question, and we'll wrap it up.
My name is Bob Hofelder. I live in Boulder, Colorado. That'll be significant in a minute. The theme of our conference this week is One Nation Shaped by the Sea. I think many of us here would agree that it's also one world shaped by the sea. And the law of the sea becomes very, very critical. We have to ratify it. So my question is, some of us, at least in this room, represent constituencies outside of the Beltway. Is there anything that we can be doing that we haven't already tried to try to get the law of the sea passed?
It's pretty apparent to the members of Congress, members of the Senate who are following this effort to ratify the law of the sea, what the targets are. It probably, if it has a chance of coming to a vote either before the election or afterward, it's going to boil down to 5 or 6 members. Locating who those members are and making sure they're acquainted with what I think are even apparent as well as valid arguments for its ratification is going to be crucial, and trying to find people who those members respect, who those senators respect, and convince them that this is in our national interest that we do this, that we ratify this Law of the Sea Convention is the only way I can think of do it. It's just, I don't know how many of you have read this recent book by Robert Caro on Johnson and have seen the skill that he used in getting controversial pieces of legislation like this through. It's a one-on-one deal. got to find out who the crucial people. Some of them you can't move either way. Some of them are movable, and our best information is it's going to boil down to 5 or 6 people. And Laura would be happy to share with you who those 5 or 6 people are.
We'll talk about that in the hallway when you go out to pick up a copy of the report card, which you can also find at jointoceancommission.org. So read the book, and then you can do that outreach. We'll talk about that in the hallway. So we're out of time. We're beyond time. Thank you. Please join me in thanking this panel, and thank you, Jason.
So I would like to thank Laura Cantrell for moderating this session. I'd like to thank the leadership of Josie, not only for this session, but for the work that they do. It's not just about building awareness, but it's about maintaining accountability of our policymakers. And so the work you do is really critical for not just this week, but for the full year. So thank you.